Ladies and gentlemen, for more than 40 years, the Right Honourable Winston Peters has been a predominant political force in New Zealand. Winston Peters is arguably one of the most fascinating people in New Zealand's political history. After being cast out of Parliament in 2020, he got back on the horse because it was not his first rodeo. And in spite of the naysayers, he rode back into government last year. Thank you for your help with that. Ladies and gentlemen, 3 years ago, the Right Honourable Winston Peters set out to do one thing: stop the out-of-control, woke, virtue-signalling Labour government from taking the country down a pathway of separatism and economic and social ruin. Now, New Zealand First is back in the exact same place before we were so rudely interrupted.
In 2023, we started out on a mission to take back our country, to put right what once was wrong, to protect democracy, to protect our freedoms, to turn our economy around, and to protect New Zealand's future. For too long, our country was on a pathway of separatism, division, and economic disaster, suited to only the elite few and not the many. We set out to return New Zealand to where it once was, #1 in the world, the best country to live in. For too long, hard-working, ordinary Kiwis were being ignored, cancelled, gaslit, shut out. For too long, our society was being divided by race, with a political agenda that suited only an elite few. For too long, our economy was on a pathway to disaster, driven by ideology and incompetence. For too long, our country was on a woke downward spiral to the bottom. There is now a new direction for New Zealand, a new future. We have made great strides to turn this country around, but our mission has just begun. New Zealand First is working with unwavering determination to fight for the future of our country and the future of our people. We have already achieved a lot, but there is still much more to do. We bring experience and common sense to this government. We bring steel to this government. We bring a voice to ordinary, hard-working New Zealanders who want to see New Zealand grow into the prosperous, egalitarian society we once knew, where government listens and delivers, where our education, health and justice systems are truly providing for and protecting all New Zealanders, where our economy fuels our country now and for our future generations, where hard-working Kiwis have a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, where we are all united as one people, where government puts New Zealanders first, where government puts New Zealand first.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the Right Honourable Winston Peters.
Trying to find space for the glass. without spilling it all over the file. Mr. President and members of the New Zealand First Party Board, ministers and members of Parliament, delegates of New Zealand First nationwide, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for being here this afternoon. Now let's make sure they all know how many are here. Over this weekend, New Zealand First has held its 31st convention. We're intergenerational. And it's been a time to reflect on our past, our present and our future. Today's public meeting is the culmination of this weekend's event. We begin today with a genuine sentiment of gratitude to those members who began a political party 31 years ago under a first-past-the-post, then electoral system, and were successful in entering Parliament as a new party called New Zealand First. And over the decades, so many of those members remained steadfast to see New Zealand First grow against enormous odds, and with a speed unparalleled in this country, to become the most powerful and influential new political party in modern New Zealand history. We salute you here today as the next generation, together with a former generation, taking this party forward to new levels of success. So thank you for coming. This has required on your part enormous sacrifice, commitment, true grit and courage, often weathering a storm of abuse and utterly unmeritorious attack after attack from those who saw the advent of New Zealand First as the greatest challenge to their combination of blind ideology and social elitism. We, from the very beginning, were for one country, one people, one flag, regardless of gender, race, or religion. One country, one people, one flag, regardless of gender, race, or creed. We were on a mission to bring equality to all those living legally in our country, regardless of when they first arrived. And today we meet as a political movement in revival with boundless prospects ahead of us, strong, visionary, whilst being driven by this most elusive quality in politics, plain common sense. And down through the decades, from the last century to this one, enduring quality above all has kept us central to New Zealand politics. Time after time you've been prepared to go the extra hour and the extra kilometre to make up for a lack of financial resources by individual work and effort. Go and look at the budgetary, annualised every election results and see which party has never had money and those that have been brimming with it. But you wouldn't think so if you're reading some of the columns you've read over the years. When we first formed a party in 1993, the two old parties, it's not known, but they conspired to ban us from public advertising for our first campaign, at pain of $100,000 on each and every occasion if we sought to advertise as they were in the campaign. That deceitful bias has been a uniquely unwelcome opponent to New Zealand First political fortunes from the very beginning until the present. But it never deterred you, it never depressed you, and it never stopped your work. It puts me in mind of a very famous person, but I can't say it because it's got a swear word in it, but perhaps I should. But he got called up by a general when his troops, about 250 of them, were cut off in the Second World War. And the general wanted to know what's happening. And he said, what's happening? They've surrounded us again, the poor bastards. Now that's attitude. And they decided we better go and find that guy because we need more of that. Well, New Zealand First has had it in spades. There are and have been thousands of examples of your sacrifices that come to mind, but one is of an elderly couple at the very beginning in 1993, delivering our campaign leaflets on foot, door to door, in the city of Christchurch. The wife going down one side of the street and the husband delivering pamphlets on the other side of the street. The husband's feet, after hours, were gathering blisters, so he took his shoes off. He kept on delivering our campaign material. Her name was Molly Hinton. His name was Jack Hinton, the Victoria Cross winner. It's countless stories like that that have been an inspiration to our members of Parliament to press on no matter what adversity, so that we stand here today stronger than we have ever been. We've been knocked down, but we got up again. Over and over again, and we didn't have a court case. There have been so many battles, but none so despicably mounted as that in April of 2020, just 2 elections ago, when the Serious Fraud Office launched an inquiry into New Zealand First, saying it would be over before the election. And all number of barristers and lawyers were saying, how could that possibly be? They knew nothing about it, but they thought, how could they possibly put a timeline on their investigations? Be over before the election. We stopped them at the edge of the court on the 29th of September 2020. But again, abusing taxpayers' money, they yet mounted a case at the High Court, where they and their supporters were roundly defeated for a second time. But it didn't stop there. Then they appealed to the Court of Appeal, where they were smashed for the third time. Some may say that's all history. We don't want to hear that, that's nostalgia. But it's not nostalgia, and it's not all history, it's relevant. It cost you, New Zealand taxpayers, $4.2 million of your money for their action. It cost us, and personally, hundreds of thousands of dollars in our rightful defence. They destroyed people on the way through and didn't care how wrong their purpose was. And we've never been given a cent back. We've never received an apology from anyone, and our press release announcing our victory for the third time saw not one media outlet publish one word. Now, I want to ask you, ladies and gentlemen, a question. When in history has the verdict of history been that of the loser? When does the winner not get a chance to say what they've won? Together with you, we did the impossible in 2023, and we came back. And since our beginning, we have compiled an unequal record of political success. Here are just some of them. Now, you know the old Maori saying, the kuma never says how sweet it is. But if you don't say something, they'll all forget pretty quickly. And some within a month. Well, we're the only party whose founders staunchly and successfully campaigned for the start of MMP. And we were the only party that successfully campaigned for a threshold, a high one of 5%. And have never changed that threshold, no matter how hard it was for us, when so many other parties wanted to lower the threshold. Over the years, our frugality with taxpayers' money spent on political parties has been unequalled. But you've never heard a word about it. When they do the annual auditing, one party has survived year after year, and one time under 50% of our entitlement, but there's never been a word of congratulations for that frugality. They just probably think we're Scots. With a suntan and a desire to save money. But we've been, in a commitment we made way back then, as careful about spending your money as we are about spending our own. We are the only party that addressed the disparity of payment between 100 years primary and secondary school teachers being paid differently on qualifications. We fixed that. We're the party that brought in free medicine for children under secondary school age. We're the party that brought in free doctors' visits for elderly people. Now, those of you who are parents of under secondary school age, I'll say it again. We're the party that brought in free medicine for children under secondary school age. that brought in hearing aid subsidies for people nearing hearing aids, and that first advocated and successfully for all the energy rebates that go with the gold card holders. New Zealand First is the party of the gold card and tens of thousands of benefits, which means elderly retirement money is going a whole lot further. One of my colleagues wanted to know where we get our haircut from, and I said there's a guy in Mount Eden that takes off 33% if you've got a gold card. It's your party that legislated for superannuation to go no lower than 66%. They'd taken it down to 60. We said no, we want it back not at 65, but no less than 66% of the average weekly wage. And we're the party of the Provincial Growth Fund, with hundreds of provincial growth projects without failure, except where there are red tape planning delays. What a record is that? There's Shane Jones out there being accused of us running a slush fund. How do you like that? Excepting when we open the projects, we're getting butted over by other MPs from other parties wanting to take credit. Look all over this country, building the biggest mussel farm, not in Australasia, but the world, in an impoverished place like Oporiki. But we're doing it over and over and over again. That sounds like a party that understands the provinces and where the real wealth of this country is created. You know, it's now called the Regional Infrastructure Fund, but now all of a sudden New Zealand regional leaders are starting to understand, ignoring the publicity and looking at the facts. And for the third time, we've addressed the issue of police numbers, when others talking a big game about law and order never ever delivered. For the third time. And it's New Zealand First that has fought for and increased the minimum wage. Not once, but a number of times. And it's this party that successfully stopped critical New Zealand assets being sold to foreign ownership. It is this party that successfully introduced a dramatic improvement to pharmaceutical funding and new drugs. This party has done it and campaigned on it. And as you heard just a short while ago from Dennis Marga from the First Union, it is New Zealand First that has fought to address the critical funding to St John. It's New Zealand First that has ensured a full independent second phase of the COVID-19 inquiry. And we've stood up for fairness and safety in women's sports. It is this party that has, as I've said a number of times, ensured the repealing of the Therapeutic Products Bill, an act where they decided to give other countries control of what we could sell here. How's that for a sellout in globalism? It is our party that is addressing the issue of migrant exploitation. We've done it over a number of years. And we've always had an immigration policy that is based on bringing in people we need, and not just the wholesale immigration of people who need us. We've got a right to know that the person coming is of the skill we need and that we've got planned housing and infrastructure to go with it. The OECD has been pointing out for decades how wrong these policies are, but whenever somebody raised the question of a focused immigration policy, like you'll see everywhere in Asia, they started shouting out xenophobia. Can't even spell the word. But shouted that out. On this issue of immigration, it is our policy that parallels other wise nations that seeks to bring in those with essential skills and train our own people in those skills as fast as we can. In the Maori world, in terms of practical common sense assistance, we have done more than all the other modern political parties all put together. As Shane Jones says, the Kumra should never say how sweet it is. But we could go on for hours and ask yourself, who gave back Mount Hikurangi? Who settled the West Coast leases? Or the Central North Island 14 iwi settlement? Who put the Maori Women's Welfare League on an independent footing and found desperately needed money for the Maori wardens? It is New Zealand First that inspired the proper settlement of the Foreshore and seabed issue back in 2004, which we had passed even from opposition. We successfully brought that legislation in. And it was New Zealand First that first funded kapahaka. I don't know what they teach them at these sociology classes, but the whole lot of young Maori don't know that. That is, we started the kapahaka funding on the basis of the funding for the National Orchestra. It just seemed to make sense. All over this country, there are hundreds and hundreds of examples of New Zealand First policies of assistance to Maori, not based on wasteful consumption, but rather infrastructure that'll be around for the next 50 years. We could go on, but we have never believed that you can build a reputation on what you're going to do, but what you've already done. Compare our record with any new political party and all the rest, all together, pale into insignificance. What has the Green Party done? What has the Party Maori done? No, he hasn't taken his hat off. That's the problem. You know, this morning on Q&A, right on target, there was a segment on the Marine and Coastal Areas Amendment Bill before Parliament now. The program had hardly started when they threw in this lie, that the amendment would take away access to customary title to the foreshore and seabed. That is false. We have always opposed the Marine and Coastal Areas 2011 Act because, contrary to its claim not to, it yet does give exclusive and occupancy to maritime areas without unbroken connection back to 1840. That's the difference. The Act of 2004 said if there's an unbroken line of connection, you've got rights. And one of the first claimants was the Auckland Yacht Club, which started in 1835. True. There were a whole lot of organisations, Maori and European, who could establish the unbroken connection. But what do these people do? They decided, under their MACA bill, the Marine and Coastal Areas legislation, to change the rules. And now there are hundreds and hundreds of claims where most claimants are fighting each other, where Maori are fighting Maori for the very rights that they say they have an unbroken connection to 1840. Their own people are disowning that in their contest. But it doesn't occur to these jurists or some of these people who think they're going to be activists, they're going to change the law of this country, and they don't understand the unfairness when real Maori out there want help in establishing an economic future where they can be independent. Just recently there were two critical decisions, one on the Eastern Bay of Plenty and then the Wairarapa coast, and hundreds of claims, as I say, have been lodged. The Waitangi Tribunal has also tried to intervene because it says the government has failed to consult. What would they do at the last election? Holidaying in Hawaii, swanning around the rest of the world. Because we were out there day after day, as we were way back in 2004. We went to every coastal tribe in 2004 and got their support for our legislation. They all know it. Every coastal tribe agreed, including mine. We should be reminded that in 2004, all coastal tribes were consulted and agreed to the Foreshore and Seabed Act. So why are we dealing with this unholy mess today? You know, the great American civil rights movement of the 1960s kept their eyes on the prize. They lamented the failure of separatism and set their goal of access for their people to the best institutions in the United States, regardless of colour or gender. Now that's a real goal. That means if you make it, you get the best. Martin Luther King was a man of great determination and purpose. He spent his life trying to bring life and purpose to a large number of people in the United States. And his efforts and those of others have always been an inspiration. Remember his wise advice? We must learn to live together as brothers. Coming forward, I'm sure he means sisters as well. We must learn to live together as brothers or perish together as fools. Ladies and gentlemen, for probably the most important time in the history of our country, we need to stand united in thought, word and deed about our future. If we don't, we are like a ship heading to the rocks. We must work together to restore New Zealand where everybody has a chance to survive and thrive if they make the effort to. In some ways, and sadly, our most endangered species are becoming people, normal people. Arguing and political posturing is expensive. It's time to stop that and begin greater cooperation. Throughout our system, and not just in politics, we seem to have forgotten that we can achieve great things by putting personal and political differences aside. We've done it before, and we can do it again. And reflecting back, one looks at the 60s and the 50s and the 40s and starts to think, what on earth did those politicians argue about then? Because they agreed on some fundamentals. Affordable, livable homes, multi-access to education, quick access to health system, and first world wages. And political scientists were getting off boats back then, trying to understand this amazing country that looked like communism, but they didn't believe in communism. They were delivering Christianity the way it should have been done without a Christian message. They were just doing what was right. And one suspects that these are people who came back from the war, had been to hell and back. They hadn't been to university, of course. But they'd been to hell and back. And they decided they're going to make their country a great place, and where the Minister of Labour knew every unemployed New Zealander by name that was registered because they were only 29. Not 1,000 or hundreds, just 29. We're still that country. We had half the population then. We're still that country. Contrast that, you know. Throughout our system, and not just in politics, we seem to have forgotten that we can achieve great things by putting personal and political differences aside. Contrast Martin Luther King's drive for his people to access the best institutions, the best universities. With our universities tumbling down the world rankings while insisting on compulsory treaty courses, and tikanga becoming a compulsory part of the law degree. What would Ngata would have thought of that, I wonder? This genius who got a law degree in 2 years flat. Or real estate agents being denied a license renewal because they didn't complete a new compulsory treaty course set by some woke idiot. If we're a Maori trying to buy a house, the commission concerns us. We don't want them being put to extra cost because you had to learn something you didn't need to learn. We want to know one thing. Is he telling us the truth about the house I'm trying to buy? When will we get back to the fundamentals and not have these people who are living off the taxpayers' teat devising ways of extracting money from you? You know, there should be standards in politics, whether in Parliament or at the United Nations Security Council. Manners matter. Respect for institutions is showing respect for their foundations and practices forged over centuries. Our job is to get the best parts of our past and meld them into the future. We're not saying the past is perfect, but much of the past is massive progress compared with where we once were. Those standards are to be cherished and preserved, not trashed on the daily basis that we are seeing today. Members coming into Parliament with T-shirts on, sandals, or half the Te Wai Pounamu extraction from the South Island hanging from their necks or some ill-fated whale bone hanging around their chest. And even bare feet. We had parliamentary standards all the way until the last Labor government allowed them to change, and for the very worst. If one looks at Parliament today, there are so many members of Parliament from particular parties that simply have no idea what it is to experience poverty and hardship. And it shows. And their opinions and speeches show that. Who think that repeating sociology lessons will improve things. You'll recognise them. Using multi-vowel word salads and waving their hands around like an Italian chef. You know they've been to training school. It's called communication. Watch carefully. All that waving around is a distraction. Listen to the words. They've graduated from university classrooms straight into parliamentary internships, then serving as ministerial advisors before becoming MPs, then as cabinet ministers, and even as prime ministers. The leadership and makeup of the former Workers' Party, Labor, has changed for the worse. Except those on the left are even worse. They are disconnected from working people. They don't understand the struggles of working men and women, or their aspirations. Instead, they are driven by ideologies and theories learned at university that prove unworkable in our real world. Whatever your voting background, if you look at parliamentarians like Peter Fraser and Norman Kirk, you have to ask, would they even recognise their party and the rise of the professional class of politicians that have taken over their former Workers' Party? Worse, Labor today is middle-class elite and don't trust the people. So they don't tell the people what they're going to do and what they're up to, as the country found out straight after the 2020 election. Neither Labor or supporters in the media have faced up to Labor's 2023 election defeat. It was the strongest repudiation of a government since 1975. Now think about that. It's the worst defeat for Labor in 50 years. But have you heard its current or past leader once explain why they faced such an historic toweling? What their contribution to their massive defeat was? Or what they were sorry for? No, they think it's all the voters' fault. They think it's all the voters' fault. Labor leader Chris Hipkins' view that the government's coalition agreements are racist and anti-Maori shows not only how myopic and out of touch his thinking is, but it puts in neon lights just how siloed his party is in their obsessive echo chamber. Labor now relies on ideological sound bites as a basis for their policy making, which, if given a cursory glance, are totally bereft. Our policy is to oppose genocide and not to come along and make a nuisance of ourselves and stop the cause. So just go home. Just go home. Yes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, let's get back here. Let's get back here. Close the doors. Isn't it amazing? They think that that's a day's work. Not the days and weeks and months and years of struggle. They think that's a cause, that's work, and that they've somehow appeased their social conscience. Bet they haven't done a finger to help anybody in Palestine in terms of money. Bet they haven't given a cent, but that's them. Labor now relies on ideological sound bites. Labor relies on ideological sound bites as a basis for their policy making, which, when given a cursory glance, are totally bereft of any facts. They have become the party of moral outrage, just like that. Only 2 weeks ago, I was talking to the representatives from Palestine. She wouldn't not even know the conversation. Talking to the foreign minister for Jordan and Egypt. She wouldn't even know. Just arrogantly walk in here, and this is what I noticed most particularly, the media rushed to cover them. You like that? That'll be on the TV tonight. Not the facts of what I've just said about who I've met overseas. Indonesia, all those countries, Malaysia, all have got a concern. No. You come along and do that, you're guaranteed to get a headline. They've become the party of moral outrage, obsessed with accusations, gotcha politics, woke ideology, and opposing anything that happens to float by. In former PM David Longie's words, they would rather self-flagellate over the last failure than celebrate 1,000 successes. It puts me in mind, at the beginning of the week, Shane and I went, at his request and at the request of the Howard League, to see these people who are training, mainly Maori, to get licences up north. Now, 50% of Maori first-time offenders are because they haven't got a driver's licence. And they're doing something about it. You know where they've got to so far? With the help also of serious money from the Provincial Growth Fund. They've trained 20,000 people to get a licence. 20,000 to get a licence, 1,000 in Kaikoai, 1,000 in Kaitaia, but all over this country. Sometimes catching young Maori and saying, look, we will not give you this ticket if you promise to go and start this class right this week. And it's changing people's lives. It's a life mobility visa we're giving them. But that's real investment, real money. But have you seen a word about it in the media? No. Well, we're all there. This is on Kaikoai on Monday, and having this marvellous celebration and not a word. As David Longie would say, they would rather self-flagellate over the last failure than celebrate 1,000 successes, or in this case, 20,000. You know, there's nothing that this government is doing that should come as a surprise to Chris Hipkins. Everything was not only campaigned on, it's in the election manifestos of the parties, and it's in our coalition agreements. Perhaps he is just surprised that a government is actually delivering on its promises. Now, many of you will know, because we've all studied it, the spiritual home of the Labour Party is the West Coast, the site of the miners' strike in 1908, and for the record, I wasn't there. Which led to the Labour Party formation in 1916, that used to represent the workers of New Zealand, the gold miners, the coal miners, the labourers, the foresters, the fishery people, the hard-working blue-collar battlers of our country. The catch cry was a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. They represented those workers in the very industries which have now become total anathema to who and what the Labour Party represents today. See what's happened? Where is the workers' friend now? If a political party today froth at the mouth every chance they got about the coalition government being racist, anti-Maori colonisers, white supremacists, exterminators of Maori, you could place any member of the Labour, Green or Maori Party caucus on that podium and you wouldn't know which one was talking. You wouldn't know which one was which. Who do Labour now represent? It seems they don't even know themselves. The Labour Party has decided their entire re-election strategy will be acting like a recently divorced partner, standing back and asking, "Don't you miss me yet?" Their lack of self-awareness is astounding. The fact is, the last 3 years of the Labour government oversaw a deteriorating economy, deteriorating education and health systems, worsening law and order in our streets, massively increased debt, record immigration, crumbling infrastructure, a cost of living crisis and a hugely divided society. That's not ideology, it's fact. Who was it that argued for zero road deaths, which no country in the world has even thought was possible? Because sometimes the machines break down. Or zero suicides as they were passing the assisted dying bill. Or gave $1.9 billion to mental health and built 5 hospital beds. This is tragic, ladies and gentlemen, because it's your money, it's your country. The key aspect of Hipkins' view is that what he's not saying should be looked at. It has been clear for some time that the Labour Party had a forlorn choice after the last election. Attempt to move to the centre to hopelessly try to regain their votes, or push further towards the woke, cultural and Marxist left. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out which path they have chosen. But that siloed left is occupied by the Maori Party and the Greens with the exact same messaging, the exact same ideology, and the exact same rhetoric. Because possibly they were educated in the exact same classes. If you've worked in dangerous jobs or unsafe jobs and low-paid jobs to get a start, your thinking starts to get coloured by those events, but you know that tomorrow will be better. If you stick at it, you're going to go forward. Hipkins' view shows just how far the Labour Party has descended away from its roots and just how they have abandoned the very people and industries who formed their party over 100 years ago. Their focus now is on issues such as race and drumming up racial rhetoric that only serves to divide our country and ignores the vast majority of New Zealanders who just want a functioning health system, a top-class education for their kids, first world wages and an affordable home. That's what all New Zealanders want, non-Maori and Maori. Delivering those 4 things has always been the focus of New Zealand First and is the focus for this coalition government. A government, I might add, that has a record number of Maori in caucus, in the caucuses, that is in the government caucuses, and in cabinet, a record number. Oh, but apparently we haven't got the right Maori quantum. Unbelievable. You feel like saying, well, take a look in the mirror, what quantum are you talking about? But I shouldn't go there. We have the largest representation ever of Maori. But all this progress, I dare say, that is a result of those who worked for a changed political system, who agreed with the 1986 Royal Commission and said MMP will deliver far more equality and representation than the old system. Some of us backed it. And here it is in Parliament, proof, a fact, it's arrived. But not them. Hardly got there without any work from them, and they want something else. They want separatism. They want there to be 2 laws in this country, 2 political systems, 2 judicial systems. And I tell you what, their biggest enemies from that cause are ordinary Maori. To call our government anti-Maori and racist shows just how shallow and impotent the once great Labour Party of Fraser, Savage and Kirk has become. New Zealand First can proudly claim to represent working people. We raised the minimum wage twice during the last 20 years when others wouldn't. We recruited more police to keep working people safe. We recognise that working people need support in later years and reward for contributing their taxes through their working life to get a decent superannuation and a gold card. And we have kept the age of eligibility for superannuation safe from the predations of other parties. Only this party has. Ladies and gentlemen, in the last campaign, one party understood how seriously our economic decline had quickly become only one party. We can recall day after day, speech after speech, wondering what are these people reading in terms of the economic circumstances of our country. Out comes the quarterly figures on 15th of March last year, and they'd already made their State of the Nation speech without the critical information they needed. as they did in September last year, without that critical update. We didn't. We said the circumstances were much worse, and we're sorry to be proven right. Latest economic figures out this week underscore how right we were, which means that if we are to make a recovery, we desperately need international investment. Mind you, had there been a compulsory savings scheme all those years ago, we'd be like Australia, somewhat more awash in money. Such is life. They might have voted us down, but they didn't vote down the problem, did they? So here we are. We need international money. And we will not get international investment if we cannot answer the simple question, why would I invest in New Zealand? That question has been there all these years, for 40 years. Why would I invest in New Zealand? Our failure to answer that question comes from the paralysis of blind ideology that begins with the belief that the tax system should be neutral and the tax system should not pick winners. All over the world, successful countries know better than that, and their economic record is proof. Singapore, that we used to help fund under the Colombo Plan, just went rocketing past us with brilliant economic strategy. Ireland, how the Irish got away with all their fighting and squabbling to agree on a plan, I don't know, but they did, and they became the Celtic Tiger, and it's worth studying. And now Croatia, and the small population of Iceland, and Nordic countries have climbed to the top of the economic performance ladder whilst we've been on the constant slide. New Zealand First policy is to answer that question. Why invest in New Zealand? We have to attract international investment the same way these countries have done, by taxation incentivisation. At a remit at our convention yesterday, we voted for a New Zealand Future Fund to investigate the development of a New Zealand Future Fund of up to $100 billion to invest solely in multi-decade infrastructure build, to ensure our future infrastructure security, and to enable future economic growth and social enablement. It's a brilliant remit. But we want these investment funds ring-fenced from politicians and ring-fenced from political interference. We want a Temasek-type model in this country as well, where somebody can be trusted to understand property, understands property, is managing the property, not somebody who got a sociology degree from York University. And where those investments are in our national interest and not offshore global ownership. $100 billion, you know, is a small sum to expect. That's the point. If you've got the plan, that's a small sum to expect. But none of the rest will get it. Only one party thinks this way and has argued for a long time that this is what should be happening. So it is New Zealand First policy to look at those successful small nations and introduce policies that mirror their successful plans. And let's face it, if an international investor comes to New Zealand to start a wealth-creating, export-driven enterprise where there was nothing there before that, then what have we got to lose? That was Ireland's great discovery. They started off with nothing, and all of a sudden, with their brilliant plan in the 80s onwards, they had TED Industries bigger than our dairy board. What do you think of that? Why didn't we pay attention? Why didn't we listen? We know the Irish are smart, they're clever, but their biggest export were young people who were trained, going to some other economy. And there are methods of doing things much more brilliant than we have been doing it in the past. See, New Zealand First understands this thing called the deficit myth. If we borrow to spend on wealth creation, rapid export growth, and resilient production, then we'll be on the same track as other successful nations, small nations, and dare we say it, the same track we were once on when we were number one in the world. Just like in a home, it's when you borrow to spend on consumption that so much economic damage is done to a nation. Ladies and gentlemen, we are not so arrogant to think that we are always right, but we will keep on trying for you and for our country. We have never claimed to be the podium of truth. Under our policies, democracy will prevail. Under our policies, equality will prevail. Under our policies, plain common sense will prevail. Under our policies, no matter what your creed, what your gender, what your race, if you make the effort, we're going to give you a chance to get there. So many of the membership of New Zealand First and its members of Parliament are the product of such beginnings, where things were tight and they were poor. It's like that famous song that Frank Sinatra sang, I've been down so long it looks like up to me. But the government's policies were wise, and we knew that there was something that we worked for. Tomorrow would be better, and the next year would be better, and one day we just might make it, and we did. We want that back again. We are going to go on promoting policies based on need, not race and not privilege. We are going to go on supporting the rule of law where everyone is equal before it. We support the right of free speech and the right of New Zealanders to say, I disagree, and not be mandated out of existence. We support the right of New Zealanders to disagree with government policy and not be punished for it. It's the essence of democracy. We are the party who saw with great clarity what was sadly happening to the country, rose up and campaigned to stop it. And had we not got back, they would have carried on. In our view, a worker is someone who works hard for their job and for their country. We are the party who represents the true, hard-working Kiwi battlers, and a whole lot of them are in business. It's not the echelon that we're talking about. It's every day going out there and working for your country and for yourselves and for your family. To our members and our non-members here today, when you go home from this meeting, please thank your wives and husbands and your children for the sacrifices you have made to be part of this great political movement. Boy, we've been put down a lot of times. So many times. But it is so proud to stand with you and with my colleagues who are doing so marvellously both in Cabinet and as a Member of Parliament to ensure that we get our country back to where it should be. Ladies and gentlemen, let me close by making one more promise again that we're delivering on. As we promised, we are taking our country back.